could you? I trusted you with everything and you did this.
I'm sorry.
5 years ago, Kang Ji-hoon buried his wife, and today he saw her alive, holding a child with his eyes. This is the story of how he destroyed his pregnant wife, how she faked her death to escape him, and how he spent everything he had to earn her back. The cemetery overlooking the Seoul skyline was a place of eternal silence. To Kang Ji-hoon, it felt like his penance. At 38, the CEO of Celestial Technologies had revolutionized the global tech industry. His wealth could rebuild cities, reshape markets, and command audiences with world leaders. But none of it could change the name carved into the granite headstone before him: Aria Thompson-Kang. For 5 years, he had convinced himself he had been justified. Today, everything he believed was about to shatter, because the woman he buried 5 years ago was about to walk back into his life. Earlier that morning, Ji-hoon stood in his penthouse office, Seoul's glittering skyline stretching endlessly before him. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a kingdom he'd built with ruthless precision. Celestial Technologies. From smartphones to AI systems, his company touched nearly every aspect of modern life. Yet as he fastened the platinum cufflinks on his custom Tom Ford suit, preparing for another obligation-filled day, he felt nothing but emptiness. 5 years had passed since the accident. 5 years since Aria's car went off Hanam Bridge during that terrible storm. Her body was never recovered. The Han River had swept everything away. They'd held a funeral with an empty casket. He'd stood in the rain, surrounded by mourners, unable to cry, because grief and guilt had tangled into something too complicated for tears. Back then, he had believed she betrayed him. The evidence had been devastating. Corporate espionage, leaked prototypes showing up in competitors' hands, financial transfers to offshore accounts, photographs of Aria meeting with his biggest rival. And through it all, his trusted advisor, Min So-yeon, had guided him toward the truth with perfect, poisonous precision. So-yeon had been his mentor's daughter, practically family. When she approached him with trembling hands and tearful eyes, presenting evidence of Aria's alleged betrayal, he had believed her without question. She'd played her role flawlessly. Document after document, photograph after photograph, building an airtight case that his wife of 2 years, the beautiful, brilliant Black American woman who'd captivated him at a tech conference in Silicon Valley, had married him for access to corporate secrets. Under pressure from his family, who had never fully accepted Aria, and consumed by his own paranoid fear of being used, he'd confronted her. He still remembered that night with crystalline, torturous clarity. The penthouse. Thunder shaking the windows, rain hammering the glass, documents scattered across the marble floor. He had demanded explanations, expected panic, expected tears, expected confession. Aria had simply looked at him. Her warm brown eyes, eyes that once gazed at him with complete adoration, had filled with something far worse than anger. Disappointment, heartbreak, the death of love in real time. She asked only one question.
Ji-hoon, do you really believe I could do this to you? To us?
He had answered with silence. Then she'd walked to their bedroom, packed a single bag, and left. No screaming, no begging, no defending herself. That was the last time he saw her. 3 days later, witnesses reported seeing her car swerve off Hanam Bridge during a typhoon. Police found her abandoned vehicle in the river. No body. After weeks of searching, she was declared legally dead. Ji-hoon had attended the funeral in a fog of complicated grief. How do you mourn someone you believed had betrayed you? How do you process losing someone you'd already pushed away? The truth came 8 months too late. A whistleblower from a rival company came forward with evidence of corporate fraud. An investigation unraveled a conspiracy that led directly to Min So-yeon. She had fabricated everything. The transfers were doctored, the photographs were manipulated, the leaked prototypes had come from So-yeon herself, who'd been selling secrets for years and needed a scapegoat. By the time Ji-hoon learned the truth, Aria was gone. Dead. He'd destroyed So-yeon's life methodically and without mercy. But revenge brought no peace. For 5 years, he'd lived in a prison of regret. He visited Aria's memorial every week, built a foundation in her name, funded scholarships for young black women in STEM fields, donated millions. None of it brought her back. The Seoul International Convention Center blazed with lights and camera flashes. The annual Asia Tech Summit Charity Gala was the industry's most prestigious event. As founder and CEO of Celestial Technologies, Ji-hoon's presence was mandatory. He arrived alone, as always, in a black Maybach. Inside, tech moguls and venture capitalists networked beneath crystal chandeliers. Then he saw her. Min So-yeon stood across the ballroom in an elegant white gown, watching him. Even after everything, after her conviction, after her family's disgrace, after her release from prison 6 months ago, she had the audacity to appear at public events. The sight of her ignited fury in his chest. The woman who destroyed his life, who murdered his marriage, who killed his wife as surely as if she'd pushed her off that bridge herself. The moment So-yeon took a step toward him, Ji-hoon turned sharply to his assistant. "Bring the car around. Now." The assistant nodded immediately. Within minutes, Ji-hoon had slipped through a side exit into the cool autumn night. He needed air, needed space, needed anything to escape the suffocating weight of his own regret. Ji-hoon loosened his tie and breathed deeply, trying to steady himself. A woman knelt beside a small child. She wore a simple midnight blue dress, elegant without trying. A cardigan draped over her shoulders. Her back faced him as she gently adjusted the collar of the child's jacket. Something inside him constricted painfully. No, impossible. His mind was playing cruel tricks. He tried to look away. He couldn't. "Hold still, baby girl," the woman said softly. God, that voice. Warm, musical. A voice that had whispered his name in the darkness. A voice he'd heard in dreams for 5 years. Ji-hoon's heart stopped. His vision tunneled. The world narrowed to just her. Aria. Before he could speak, the little girl beside her giggled and squirmed playfully. "Mommy, can we go home? I'm sleepy." The child turned toward the light. Ji-hoon's knees nearly buckled. She couldn't have been older than 4. Soft curls framed her face in a beautiful halo. A little girl who looked like both of them, impossibly, beautifully real. Their eyes met, recognition flashed across her face. Without thinking, without hesitating, she stepped directly in front of the little girl, shielding her. The gesture pierced through him like a blade. She looked at him the way someone looks at a threat. He'd seen her disappointed. He'd seen her heartbroken. But he had never seen her afraid of him. He raised his hand instinctively, a gesture meant to show he meant no harm. She scooped the little girl into her arms. A modest gray Honda pulled up. Aria secured the child into a car seat with practiced speed and jumped behind the wheel. Ji-hoon ran until his lungs burned. His mind couldn't process what his eyes had seen. Aria. Not dead, not drowned, not buried, alive. And she had his daughter. For 5 years he'd mourned a ghost. For 5 years he'd visited an empty grave. For 5 years she'd been alive. "Chairman Kang, sir, what happened? Are you all right?" He stood frozen on that sidewalk, staring at nothing, seeing everything. She's alive. Inside the backseat of his Maybach, silence pressed against him like deep water. Drive. Sir, where should I? Anywhere. Just drive. The chauffeur obeyed without question. Seoul's neon-lit streets blurred past the windows. Ji-hoon closed his eyes, but that made it worse. All he could see was her face, alive, terrified, running from him. And the little girl. God, the little girl. His mind began calculating automatically. 5 years since the accident. If Aria had been pregnant when she disappeared, the timeline aligned perfectly. She would have found out shortly after leaving, or maybe she knew during that final confrontation. What if she'd been carrying his child while he accused her of betrayal? The thought made him physically ill. He imagined her alone in some hospital, finding out she was pregnant, alone through morning sickness, alone through doctor's appointments, alone through labor and delivery, alone through sleepless nights and first steps and first words. While he mourned at an empty grave, she'd been raising their daughter, without support, without family, without him. And then the worst realization of all crashed over him. She'd faked her death. She'd found living as a ghost preferable to living as his wife, because he'd made her feel that unwanted, that unsafe, that disposable. For the first time in 5 years, Kang Ji-hoon broke. A sound escaped him, half sob, half gasp. His hands shook. His carefully constructed armor of guilt and professionalism cracked completely. He'd found her, and all she felt when she saw him was fear. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands. His voice was steady when his head of security answered. "I need footage from the convention center's main entrance, last 30 minutes. "Yes, sir." There was a gray Honda sedan. "I need the license plate, traffic cameras, GPS tracking. I need to know where that vehicle went." Ji-hoon's voice dropped to something raw and desperate. "Whatever it costs, whatever it takes, find her." Kang Ji-hoon possessed nearly everything a man could desire. Power, wealth, influence, innovation that changed the world. But for the first time in his life, he understood true desperation. He had found her. And this time, he would search every corner of the earth before he allowed her to disappear again. The days after the encounter crawled by with agonizing slowness. Ji-hoon barely slept, barely ate. He moved through board meetings like a machine, approving strategies he didn't hear, signing documents he didn't read. His mind existed elsewhere entirely. Finally, 1 week later, his head of security entered his office with a sealed envelope. The man's expression was carefully neutral. "We found her, sir." Ji-hoon's hand froze halfway to the envelope. For a moment, he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. 5 years of believing her dead. Inside was the life Aria Thompson-Kang had built in the ashes of their marriage. Photographs spilled across his glass desk. Not society pages, not red carpet events from her years as his wife. Real life. Aria carrying groceries up the stairs of a modest apartment building in Busan, hours away from Seoul. Aria walking hand in hand with their daughter on the way to a preschool. Aria working behind the counter of a small community center, teaching coding classes to underprivileged children. Aria sitting alone at a kitchen table late at night, studying textbooks beneath the warm glow of a lamp. She looked different. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by jeans and simple sweaters. The jewels he'd given her, the diamonds, the platinum, the status symbols, had vanished. But despite the exhaustion visible in some photos, despite the weight of raising a child alone, She'd built a real life, not the performance she'd lived as his wife, constantly trying to prove herself worthy to his family, constantly walking on eggshells in a world that saw her as an outsider. This was her, unapologetically, beautifully her. Ji-hoon forced himself to read the full report. She'd moved to Busan 4.5 years ago, worked multiple jobs initially, refused to use her degrees from MIT and Stanford, probably to avoid being found. Eventually found work at a community technology center, built a reputation teaching kids to code. Lived simply, kept to herself, raised their daughter, her name was Aria Thompson, with everything she had. She'd never touched the bank accounts he'd set up during their marriage, never claimed the settlement his lawyers tried to send, never used his name or connections, built everything from scratch with her own hands. Not because she had to, because she wanted nothing from him. She'd disappeared to build a life free from his judgment, his family's prejudice, his devastating betrayal. And she'd succeeded. Ji-hoon closed his eyes and let himself remember. The whispers at family dinner, the subtle insults hidden behind polite Korean phrases Aria didn't fully understand. She'd learned the language for him, studied the culture, tried so hard to belong. And they'd made sure she never felt welcome. Then Min So-yeon had used that isolation masterfully. A forged email here, a manipulated photo there, fabricated financial records, one carefully constructed lie after another. And Ji-hoon, instead of defending his wife, had believed the worst of her. He remembered the night he confronted her, the penthouse, the storm, her standing in the middle of their living room surrounded by his accusations. He saw it now, the exact moment her heart broke, the exact moment she gave up, not just on their marriage, on him, on them, on everything they'd built. She'd nodded once, tears finally sliding down her beautiful face, and whispered, "I thought you knew me better than anyone." Then she'd packed a bag and walked out, into a storm, pregnant with his child though he hadn't known, heartbroken, alone. And 3 days later, her car went off a bridge. Somehow she'd survived, and she'd let him believe her dead rather than face him again. She'd chosen death, or the appearance of it, over reconciliation. Because what he'd done to her, the betrayal of trust, the accusation without trial, the choosing of lies over love, had been unforgivable. But the truth was uglier. He'd murdered their marriage with his own hands, driven her to fake her own death, cost their daughter years with her father. And now, Aria's message was clear. Stay away. But he couldn't. Not anymore. Not when he knew the truth. Not when he had a daughter who didn't know his face. Not when the woman he'd loved more than anything was alive and within reach. He needed to see them, to see her, even if just from a distance. He needed to witness the life he'd destroyed, and somehow, the little girl wore bright yellow rain boots despite the clear sky, and she skipped more than walked, pointing excitedly at every bird and butterfly. Then a soccer ball escaped from a group of children and rolled directly toward Ji-hoon's bench. Ji-woo chased after it, her yellow boots splashing through a puddle. She stopped a few feet away, noticing the stranger. Ji-hoon bent slowly and picked up the ball. For one eternal moment, father and daughter stared at each other. Up close, the resemblance stole his breath. She had Aria's warm brown skin, her beautiful curls, her bright smile, but her eyes, a perfect blend of both of them. He held out the ball with a trembling hand. "Here you go." Ji-woo stepped forward, her head tilted curiously. "Thank you, mister. I'm Ji-woo. I'm 4. She held up 4 fingers proudly. 4? Ji-hoon managed. "That's very grown up. Mommy says I'm her big girl." Then she smiled, revealing a dimple in her left cheek. "Do you like soccer?" "I'm learning." "I used to play when I was young." "Really? Were you good?" "I was okay." Looking into eyes that mirrored his own, feeling the warmth of her presence, reality hit him with devastating force. This bright, joyful, perfect little girl was his daughter. And she had no idea who he was. "Maybe you could teach me, Ji-woo!" Aria's voice cut through the park like a whip. Ji-hoon looked up. Aria was running toward them, her book abandoned on the grass. Fear, the same terror from the gala, filled her face. She reached them and immediately pulled Ji-woo behind her, placing her body between the child and Ji-hoon. "Don't you dare!" she hissed. Her voice shook with barely controlled panic. "I know exactly what you're doing." Her eyes blazed. "Following us, watching us. Stay away from my daughter." "Our daughter," he said quietly. The words hung in the air like a grenade. Aria's expression shifted from fear to fury. "You have no rights," she said, voice low and dangerous. "You lost all rights 5 years ago. Don't say my name. Don't follow us. Don't come near us again." "Come on, baby. We're leaving." "But I want to play more." "We'll go get ice cream instead. Come on." Without another glance, Aria took Ji-woo's hand and led her quickly toward the parking lot. Ji-hoon remained where he stood, but as they left, Ji-woo dropped something. A small stuffed animal, a rabbit wearing a tiny backpack. Ji-hoon stared at it. His mind immediately went to the worst place. DNA confirmation. The thought made him sick. There were a few strands of hair caught on the Velcro of the backpack. Ji-hoon bypassed all standard channels. He requested the highest level of privacy. And then he waited. 2 days felt like 2 years. He sat in his penthouse office, unable to work, unable to think, unable to do anything but wait. His tablet finally vibrated with an encrypted notification. The results had arrived. His hand shook as he opened the file. His eyes skipped past medical terminology, genetic markers, probability calculations, straight to the conclusion. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Ji-hoon couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He'd known, of course he'd known, but seeing it confirmed, seeing it in clinical scientific language, made it undeniably, irrevocably real. Ji-woo was his daughter, the little girl who loved soccer, the little girl with his eyes and Aria's smile, the little girl who'd lived 4 years without knowing her father. His daughter. He imagined Aria receiving the pregnancy news alone, deciding to fake her death alone, giving birth alone, holding their daughter for the first time with no one beside her. First words, first steps, first days of school, everything, all of it, alone. He'd destroyed the woman he loved, stolen years from his daughter. And now, even though they were alive, even though they were within reach, they wanted nothing to do with him. Because he'd earned nothing, deserved nothing. And the worst part, the part that made him want to scream, because what kind of man accuses his pregnant wife of betrayal? What kind of man chooses lies over love? What kind of man drives the mother of his child to fake her own death? After 1 week of desperate hope, after 2 days of agonizing waiting, "Sir, I thought you should know. Miss Thompson visited the Busan Port International Terminal this afternoon." Ji-hoon's blood turned to ice. What do you mean? She booked 2 tickets on a cargo passenger ship. Destination, Los Angeles. According to our sources, she's also been in contact with a school district in California and a moving company. When? Ji-hoon managed. The ship departs in 3 days, sir. And chairman, the man hesitated. She's been liquidating assets, closed her bank account, gave notice at her job. According to surveillance, she's packing the apartment now. Ji-hoon couldn't speak, couldn't process. His phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the desk. For several long moments, he sat completely still. 3 days. She was leaving in 3 days. Not just Busan, not just Korea, the country entirely. Back to America, where she'd have family, support, lawyers. Where he'd have no access, no leverage, no chance. If she boarded that ship, if she took Ji-woo to America, he would lose them. Not temporarily, forever. For years, he'd protected his empire above all else. Today, he chose his daughter. Today, he chose his wife. Today, he chose the life he should have fought for 5 years ago. His driver stood waiting beside the company car. "Sir, where—" "Keys," Ji-hoon said. The driver handed them over immediately. Moments later, Ji-hoon was behind the wheel, weaving through Seoul traffic with reckless urgency. The 2-hour drive to Busan felt infinite. Every minute lost felt like another step closer to losing them forever. His phone rang continuously. The board, investors, his mother. He ignored them all. Nothing mattered. Nothing except reaching her. Finally, after the longest drive of his life, he turned onto the familiar street in Busan. His heart stopped. A taxi sat outside Aria's apartment building. The trunk was open. 2 large suitcases had already been loaded, and standing beside the car, holding Ji-woo's hand, was Aria. She wore jeans and one of her simple sweaters, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked beautiful and terrified and determined. Ji-hoon slammed on the brakes. He barely remembered to put the car in park before jumping out. "Aria!" She turned. The moment she saw him, her face shifted through several emotions. Shock, recognition, fear. She looked at Ji-woo, then at the taxi, then back at him. He saw her calculating escape routes. "Please," he called out, closing the distance between them. "Please don't leave." "How did I—" "I'm begging you, Aria, don't get on that ship." Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to show up and—" "I know," he interrupted. "I know I don't have the right. I know I destroyed everything. I know I don't deserve even this conversation. But please, please don't take her away before I even have the chance to know her." "You had a chance, Ji-hoon. You had a wife who loved you more than anything, and you threw her away. I know. You believed I could betray you, after everything, after I gave up my career, my country, my language, my entire life to be with you. You believed I was capable of that. Do you know what it was like? Standing in our home while the man I loved looked at me like I was a stranger, like I was some corporate spy. Aria, I was pregnant, Ji-hoon." The words came out in a rush. "When you accused me, when you chose her lies over my truth, when you looked at me like I was worthless, I was carrying your child." "I found out 2 days after I left," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "I was alone in a clinic. The doctor congratulated me, asked if the father was excited." She laughed bitterly. "The father thought I was a criminal." Ji-hoon's knees felt weak. Don't," she cut him off. "Don't apologize, because sorry doesn't fix it. Sorry doesn't give me back the months I spent terrified and alone. Sorry doesn't give Ji-woo the father she deserved from birth. Sorry is just a word." The little girl was watching them with wide, confused eyes, sensing the adult pain but not understanding it. The CEO who commanded billions, the man who just walked away from a $47 billion deal, on his knees on a Busan sidewalk. "I was wrong," he said, "about everything. I was wrong to believe So-yeon. I was wrong to doubt you. I was wrong to value my pride over your love. I was wrong to make you feel like you had to prove your worth. I was wrong to let my family treat you like an outsider. I was wrong to accuse you without trial. I was wrong to drive you to fake your death. I was wrong to cost our daughter her father. I was wrong about everything. You asked me that night if I really believed you could betray me. The truth is, I was terrified. Terrified that someone like you, brilliant, beautiful, kind, could actually love someone like me. Terrified it was too good to be true. And when So-yeon gave me an excuse to believe the worst, I took it. Because being betrayed felt safer than being vulnerable. I chose fear over faith. I chose pride over trust. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. Maybe not today, maybe not ever. But please don't take her away from me before I even have the chance to know her. Before I can tell her I'm sorry. Before I can try to be the father she deserves." He finally looked up at Ji-woo. The little girl stared at him with curious, concerned eyes. "I've missed 4 years. 4 years of scraped knees and first words and learning to walk. I can't get that back. But please, please don't make me miss the rest of her life." Aria stood frozen. Everything inside her screamed to run, to protect herself, to protect Ji-woo, to get in that taxi and never look back, because she remembered what trusting him cost her. She remembered the pain of loving someone who could so easily believe the worst of her. Then a small voice broke the silence. "Mommy, why is the man crying?" "Because he's sad, baby." "Why is he sad?" Aria's voice caught. "Because he lost something very important." "Don't cry, mister. It's okay." "When I'm sad, my mommy hugs me. Do you need a hug?" "I don't deserve your kindness," he whispered in Korean. Ji-woo didn't understand all the words, but she understood emotion. She wrapped her small arms around his neck in an impulsive, innocent hug. Ji-hoon closed his eyes and carefully, reverently, returned the embrace. He held his daughter, felt the warmth of her small body, and wept. Aria watched, tears streaming down her own face. For 4 years, she'd convinced herself she was protecting Ji-woo. But watching her daughter's instinctive compassion, watching Ji-hoon's broken redemption, she wondered if she'd been protecting herself instead. Slowly, she turned toward the taxi driver. "I'm sorry. We won't be going to the port." Ji-hoon's head snapped up. "We're not going back to your old life. Do you understand me? I will never again live in that penthouse. I will never again subject myself or my daughter to people who see us as less than. I will never again be the wife on display to prove you're progressive or international or whatever it was I was supposed to represent." "Never," he agreed immediately. "I left all of that. I'll leave more if I have to." "If we do this," she continued, her voice trembling but firm, "we start from nothing, from scratch. You don't get to buy your way back into our lives. You don't get to throw money at this and call it fixed. You want to be Ji-woo's father? You earn it every single day. Anything you ask." "And you and me?" She met his eyes. "I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if I can ever trust you again the way I did. I don't know if love can survive what you did to it." "I know," he said quietly. "But if you give me the chance, I'll spend the rest of my life trying." For a long moment, Aria simply looked at him, at this man who'd destroyed her and was now offering everything to make it right. But looking at Ji-woo still wrapped in her father's arms, looking confused but happy, Aria made a choice. Not for herself, not even for Ji-hoon, for their daughter. Because every child deserved the chance to know their father, if that father was genuinely willing to change. "One chance," she said finally. "You get one chance. And the moment you hurt her, I won't," he said with absolute conviction. "I swear on everything I have, I won't." Aria nodded slowly. Then she did something she never thought she'd do again. She reached out and gently brushed a tear from his cheek. "Then get up, Ji-hoon, and let's start from the beginning." Healing didn't happen overnight. Trust wasn't restored with apologies and tears. Love alone couldn't bridge 5 years of pain, betrayal, and separation. So Ji-hoon stopped trying to fix everything immediately. Instead, he showed up. Every single day he showed up. He moved to Busan, not to a luxury apartment, to a modest place in Ji-woo's neighborhood. He learned her schedule: school drop-off at 8 a.m., pickup at 3 p.m., soccer practice Tuesdays and Thursdays. At first, Aria only allowed supervised visits: 1 hour at the park, dinner at a family restaurant, always public, always with her present. Ji-hoon never complained, never pushed, never demanded more than she was willing to give. He learned fatherhood from scratch, bedtime stories in his awkward English-Korean mix that made Ji-woo giggle, braiding hair through a dozen YouTube tutorials, attending every soccer game and cheering too loudly, bandaging scraped knees, learning that chicken nuggets cut into stars tasted better than regular nuggets for reasons he'd never understand, losing imaginary battles to dragons and superheroes in playgrounds across Busan. And slowly, Ji-woo began to open up. Mr. Ji-hoon became Ji-hoon-shi became, after 3 months of consistency, one magical afternoon, Appa. When she called him that for the first time, casually, while asking him to push her on the swings, Ji-hoon had to turn away to hide his tears. Aria, watching from a nearby bench, cried too. With Aria, progress was slower, harder, more fragile, but it happened. He cut ties completely with anyone who disrespected her. When his mother demanded he stop this foolishness and return to Seoul, he respectfully told her she could accept his family or lose her son. She chose pride. He chose Aria. When business associates asked about the situation, he corrected them firmly. "My wife and daughter, not a situation, my family." He attended therapy, individual sessions to process his guilt, his fear, his need for control. Family sessions where Aria finally felt safe enough to express her pain. The sessions were brutal. She didn't hold back, and he didn't defend himself. He listened, apologized, took responsibility, and proved, through action, that he was different. Months passed. Their new life wasn't built on luxury or status. It was built on ordinary moments. Morning coffee deliveries to Aria's new job at Busan National University's Computer Science Department. Quiet evenings after work, teaching Ji-woo Korean folk tales. Burnt attempts at cooking Southern American food that left his kitchen in ruins and Aria laughing so hard she cried. Slowly, carefully, Aria watched the man she'd feared become someone entirely different. Not perfect, not without flaws, but present, consistent, safe, humble. And little by little, the walls around her heart began to lower. Not because she forgot. She would never forget. but because he gave her new memories to stand beside the painful ones. Beside him, Aria rested comfortably against his shoulder. No tension, no fear, just peace. Across the field, Ji-woo ran with a bright red kite dancing behind her, her laughter carrying on the wind. Aria raised an eyebrow. I wonder where she gets that from. Her mother, obviously. Obviously. They both laughed. Suddenly, the kite crashed into the grass. Ji-woo stared at it for exactly 2 seconds. Appa! She abandoned the kite and sprinted toward them. Appa, did you see? I flew it so high! Ji-hoon dropped to one knee just in time to catch her in his arms. Ji-woo giggled as he spun her around. The sound filled the entire park, filled his entire heart. Kang Ji-hoon finally understood something that had taken him 38 years to learn. Success wasn't measured in acquisitions or market dominance. It wasn't counted in billions or technology patents. Those things could vanish overnight. But this, the warmth of his daughter's arms around his neck, the trust slowly rebuilding in Aria's eyes, the quiet peace he once thought he'd destroyed forever. This was wealth. This was legacy. This was everything. After losing everything, after mourning a ghost, after discovering the truth too late, after earning back what he'd destroyed, he finally understood what mattered most: family, love, forgiveness, and the precious, undeserved grace of a second chance. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to Afro-Korean Studio. Tell us in the comments, do you believe love can survive betrayal? Can trust be rebuilt? Share your thoughts below. Please share your thoughts in the comments.